For decades, we were taught a simple story. Humanity was born in Africa. And once, around 60 to 70,000 years ago, a small group of humans left. They moved forward. They did not return. They did not overlap with earlier travelers. That single migration became the foundation of every non-African population alive today. It was a clean story, linear, comforting. But what if it was incomplete? What if humans did not leave Africa once, but many times? What if some of those migrations turned back? And what if entire waves of people vanished from history, erased from textbooks, yet still lingering, quietly, inside our DNA? That question is where this investigation begins. The new detectives of human history. For most of modern history, the past belonged to archaeologists and historians. They worked with fragments, bones, stone tools, cave paintings. They reconstructed humanity's story from what survived. Today, a new kind of investigator has joined them. Geneticists. They don't search deserts or ruins. They read something far more intimate, the human genome. Every cell in your body contains an archive, a biological record of journeys, encounters, separations, and disappearances, many of which left no written trace. And when scientists began reading that archive carefully, it started telling a story that did not match the classic single-exit model. The first cracks in the old narrative. As genetic data from populations around the world accumulated, something strange appeared. Some non-African groups were too different. Their genetic divergence didn't align with a single migration timeline. The numbers suggested separations far older than the standard model allowed. It was as if the map of human history had hidden layers. On the surface, one arrow out of Africa. Beneath it, faint traces of other paths, partially erased. And this led to a destabilizing question. What if we are only seeing the migrations that survived? Africa wasn't just a starting point. The traditional view treated Africa like a launch pad. Humanity departed and never looked back. Genetics paints a different picture. Africa appears not as a beginning, but as a dynamic center. People left Africa. Some settled in the Levant. Some moved into Asia and Europe. And some, unexpectedly, returned. These back migrations are nearly invisible archaeologically, but they are written into chromosomes, which means something radical. Human history is not an arrow. It is a loop. Forgotten waves. Genetic models now suggest that early exits from Africa may have occurred as far back as 120,000 to 200,000 years ago. Some of these populations reached the Middle East. Some may have pushed deeper into Asia, but most of them disappeared. They were replaced by later migrations, absorbed into other groups, or eliminated by climate shifts, ecological collapse, or competition. Yet extinction is rarely absolute. Fragments remain small, anomalous stretches of DNA that do not fit neatly into the dominant narrative. Like static in a signal. Like echoes of people who once walked the same landscapes we do. A scientific tension. At this point, a conflict emerged. Archaeologists were cautious. Historians were skeptical. Because if geneticists were right, then a significant portion of human history was missing. Not suppressed. Not erased deliberately. Simply unseen, because we lack the tools to detect it. DNA does not provide names or dates. It speaks in probabilities and patterns. And so began a new phase of inquiry, linking genetic anomalies to migration routes, and statistical signals to real human lives. The core revelation. By the end of this opening chapter, one conclusion becomes unavoidable. Human migration was chaotic, reversible, and overlapping. There was no single successful journey. There were many attempts, many failures, many returns. Modern humanity is not the product of one clean expansion. We are the result of layered waves, each partially overriding, but never fully erasing the last. And in the next section, we will follow those waves more closely, through genetic lineages, ancient encounters, and the invisible ancestors who still shape who we are today. To understand how human migration truly unfolded, scientists had to stop looking at humanity as a single mass and start following separate genetic trails. Not all DNA tells the same story. Some parts of our genome mix every generation. Others pass down almost unchanged, like heirlooms. These became the key tools of investigation. 2 lines, 2 stories. Geneticists focused on 2 specific markers. Y-chromosome DNA, passed from father to son. Mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, passed from mother to child. They function like 2 independent witnesses to the past, and they do not always agree. The paternal trail, long roads outward. The Y chromosome revealed a pattern that looked, at first glance, reassuringly familiar. Many non-African male lineages traced back to a relatively small set of ancestors who lived outside Africa around 60 to 70,000 years ago. This seemed to support the classic migration story. But then the anomalies appeared. Some Y lineages branched far earlier than expected. Others showed evidence of regional persistence, surviving waves of later migrants. Instead of a single highway out of Africa, the Y chromosome suggested a network of routes, active at different times, overlapping and intersecting. Migration was not a march. It was a series of experiments. The maternal trail, a different map. Mitochondrial DNA told a quieter, but more unsettling story. Some maternal lineages outside Africa appeared older than their supposed arrival dates. Others seemed to disappear entirely, replaced by later maternal waves. In some regions, paternal ancestry suggested continuity, while maternal ancestry showed near-total replacement. This implied something unexpected. Migration was often gender asymmetric. In some cases, incoming male groups integrated with local female populations. In others, entire maternal lines vanished through displacement, assimilation, or demographic collapse. Human movement was not just geographic. It was social, unequal, and deeply shaped by survival pressures. Ghost populations. As datasets expanded, geneticists began detecting signals they couldn't explain with known populations. These were not Neanderthals, not Denisovans. They were something else. Scientists called them ghost populations, groups that contributed DNA to modern humans, but left no clear archaeological trace. Their existence could only be inferred statistically. Small fragments of DNA appeared in modern genomes that didn't match any known ancient sample. They pointed to people who lived, migrated, mixed, and then vanished. Entire human stories, known only because their genetic fingerprints still exist. Backflows into Africa. Perhaps the most disruptive finding came next. Genetic evidence showed that Africa was not only a source of migration, but also a destination. Populations that left Africa thousands of years earlier returned, bringing new genetic material back with them. This contradicted decades of assumption. Africa was not genetically pure or isolated. It was constantly reshaped by interaction. Some African populations today carry Eurasian genetic markers, far older than colonial or historical contact. Human movement did not end at continental boundaries. Climate as the invisible hand. Behind many of these migrations was a force more powerful than ambition or curiosity, climate. Ice ages closed routes. Green corridors opened them. The Sahara was not always a barrier. At times, it became a grassland highway. When climate shifted, populations moved or disappeared. Migration was often not choice. It was necessity. Overlapping timelines. What emerged from genetic modeling was not a clean sequence, but overlapping chronologies. Early migrants left Africa and stalled. Later migrants followed and replaced them, partially. Some mixed. Some vanished. Some left only traces. Modern humans are not descendants of one successful group, but survivors of repeated population turnovers. Each wave reshaped the genetic landscape without fully erasing what came before. The end of a linear story. By this point, the classic narrative had collapsed. There was no single departure, no single expansion, no single ancestry. Human history looked less like a timeline and more like sedimentary layers. Each generation built on fragments of the past, some visible, some buried. And just as scientists thought they understood the complexity of modern humans, they realized something else was missing. Because migration didn't just shape where humans went, it shaped who we became, through contact with other kinds of humans. And that is where the story turns next. For a long time, the story of modern humans had a quiet assumption built into it. We left Africa, and everywhere we went, we were alone. Other human species were treated like evolutionary side notes, failed experiments, dead ends. But genetic evidence forced a far more uncomfortable realization. We were not alone, and we did not replace everyone. We merged. The first shock: Neanderthals were not strangers. When scientists first extracted ancient DNA from Neanderthal remains, they expected distance. Instead, they found familiarity. Every non-African human alive today carries Neanderthal DNA. Not much, roughly 1 to 2%, but enough to matter. This was not contamination, not coincidence. It was proof of contact. Somewhere outside Africa, modern humans encountered Neanderthals and had children with them. This wasn't a single event. It happened repeatedly, across thousands of years and vast regions. Neanderthals were not shadows at the edge of our story. They were part of our family tree. Denisovans, the invisible ancestors. Then came an even stranger discovery. In a Siberian cave, scientists found a fragment of bone, too small to identify by shape alone. But its DNA told a shocking story. It belonged to a previously unknown human group, the Denisovans. They left almost no fossils, no clear tools, no art. Yet their genetic legacy survives, especially in people from Melanesia, Australia, and parts of Southeast Asia. Some populations carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA, meaning, as modern humans spread eastward, they encountered and integrated with humans we didn't even know existed. History didn't erase them. It simply forgot their names. Admixture was not an exception. What became clear was this: interbreeding was not rare. It was normal. Whenever modern humans met other hominin populations, boundaries blurred. There were no clean separations, no strict species walls. These groups lived close enough, long enough, to form families. Human evolution wasn't driven by isolation, but by contact. What we inherited. This genetic mixing wasn't neutral. Some inherited genes vanished quickly. Others persisted because they helped us survive. Neanderthal DNA is linked to immune responses, skin pigmentation, and cold adaptation. Denisovan genes affect oxygen processing, critical for life at high altitudes, especially in Tibet. These were not curiosities. They were advantages. Parts of what allowed humans to thrive outside Africa came from people who are now extinct. Modern humanity is not purely modern. It is a composite. The cost of mixing. But admixture also carried consequences. Some Neanderthal-derived genes are associated with autoimmune disorders and metabolic conditions. Others increase susceptibility to depression or addiction. Evolution is not optimization. It is trade-off. What saved one generation may burden another. Our genome is a record of compromises, shaped by survival, not foresight. Ghosts beyond Neanderthals. Even Neanderthals and Denisovans were not the full story. Genetic signals suggest admixture with unknown hominin groups, especially in Africa. Populations that left no fossils. No tools we can confidently identify. Only traces. Africa, long assumed to be genetically uniform in deep time, now appears to have hosted multiple human lineages interacting, separating, and reconnecting. Human evolution didn't simplify inside Africa. It fragmented. The collapse of US versus them. At this point, a dangerous idea collapses. There's no clear line between modern humans and others. No moment where one group replaced all the rest. Instead, humanity emerged from entanglement. We didn't inherit the earth by conquest alone. We inherited it through connection. The people we replaced are still here, inside us. A new question emerges. If humanity is the result of repeated migrations, returns, overlaps, and mergers, then what does it mean to belong? What does ancestry mean, if everyone is mixed with someone who no longer exists? The story of migration didn't just shape our bodies. It shaped our identity. And that realization leads to the final step of this journey. Because if history lives inside our chromosomes, then the question isn't where did we come from? It's, what does that past mean for who we are now? By the time the evidence is laid out, genetic trails, forgotten migrations, vanished humans, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. Human history was never clean. It was never linear, never orderly. never finished. What we once imagined as a single, heroic journey out of Africa now looks more like a long series of attempts, some successful, some erased, many overlapping. Migration didn't just move humans across the planet. It rewrote humanity itself, the end of the pure origin myth. For much of modern history, humans searched for purity in the past. A single homeland, a single lineage, a single beginning. But the genome tells a different story. There's no population on Earth untouched by migration, no ancestry free from mixture, no group that can trace itself to a single moment of origin. Every genome is layered, African, not African, ancient, recent, surviving, extinct. What we call modern humans are not a finished product, but a continuing process, history written in flesh. What makes this realization unsettling is not its complexity, but its intimacy. This history isn't carved in stone or buried in ruins. It's written into muscle cells, into neurons, into the immune systems that protect us, and sometimes fail us. Every person alive today carries the echoes of people who walked different continents under different skies. People who adapted, people who mixed, people who vanished. We are not separated from them by time. We are made of them. Why some stories survived and others didn't. One of the most uncomfortable implications of genetic history is this. The migrations we remember are not necessarily the most important ones. They are simply the ones that left descendants. Entire populations shaped humanity and disappeared. Not because they were weaker, not because they were inferior, but because climate shifted, routes closed, or later waves arrived. Survival was often random, and history rewards survival with memory. Migration is a constant, not an exception. The idea that migration is a modern crisis collapses under genetic scrutiny. Humans have always moved, always mixed, always adapted. Borders are new. Movement is ancient. What we see today, displacement, blending, cultural tension, is not a break from human history. It is its continuation. Identity beyond blood. If ancestry is fragmented and overlapping, then identity cannot be reduced to DNA alone. Genes tell us where fragments of us came from. They do not tell us who we are. Culture, memory, language, shared stories. These bind humans more tightly than chromosomes ever could. History didn't just shape our bodies. It shaped our meanings. A new way to see humanity. Seen through the lens of migration, humanity is no longer a collection of separate groups competing for origin. It is a single, tangled story, spread across continents and time. Differences between us are real, but they are shallow compared to the depth of what we share. Every boundary we draw today cuts through ancient connections. The final revelation, the most important discovery genetic science has made, is not about where we came from. It's about what the past refuses to do. It refuses to stay buried. It refuses to be simple. It refuses to belong to one group alone. History is not behind us. It is inside us. Closing thought. When we ask where humanity came from, we are asking the wrong question. The better one is this. How many lives, journeys, and forgotten stories are moving through us right now, without us ever knowing their names? Because the migration that rewrote humanity never ended. It's still happening, and so are we.